You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Given all the pain in the world, this week we're going to devote the entire show to something wondrous, filled with hope, and that's been here all along. It's indigenous. My guests for the conversation are two remarkable women. Cherríe Moraga, the well-known poet, playwright, and essayist, and Celia Herrera Rodríguez, internationally celebrated painter, performance, and installation artist. So let's get started by, this week, going outside the headlines. Celia Herrera Rodríguez is a Xicana and Odomi artist whose work reflects a full generation of dialogue with Xicana, Native American, pre-Columbian, and Mexican thought. She received her BA in Art and Ethnic Studies from CSU Sacramento and an MFA in Painting from the University of Illinois, and went on to study at the Art Institute of Chicago, where she exhibited extensively and became involved in installation and performance art. Returning to California in the mid-1990s, she's taught diversity studies at California College of the Arts and also teaches Mexicano art history and practice at the Chicano Studies program at UC Berkeley. Her paintings, drawings, and installation work have been exhibited nationally, including at the Institute of American Indian Art in Santa Fe, Tufts University Gallery, and the Mexican Museum in San Francisco, and she is shown internationally at the University of Cork, Ireland, and the Centro Colombo Americano, Colombia, among others. Her work is permanently housed in private and public collections, including the Mexican Fine Arts Center in Chicago. Since the mid-1990s, she has performed with many of her installations as stagings, where the cultural symbology of her paintings moves into the three-dimensional world of Mexicana and indigenous history. In recent years, she has applied her work as a conceptual artist to set and costume design, chiefly in collaboration with playwright Cherríe Moraga. Cherríe Moraga is a Xicana poet, essayist, political theorist, and playwright, also known internationally for her work as co-editor with Gloria Anzaldúa of This Bridge Called My Back, Writings by Radical Women of Color. She's the author of Loving in the War Years, Waiting in the Wings, Native Country of the Heart, and numerous other books, plays, and essays, and she's the winner of the Critics Circle Award, Penn West Prize, and the American Book Award. She is one of the very few writers to introduce the theme of Xicana lesbianism and to produce work rich with textures of sexuality, race, identity, and unsilencing. Her 1996 play, Watsonville, Someplace Not Here, was commissioned by the Rockefeller Foundation and had its world premiere at the Bravo Theater, and it won the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts Prize for New American Plays Award. We have to take our first pause here, but then, so that we won't be interrupted during our extended conversation about Las Maestras with Celia Herrera Rodríguez and Cherríe Moraga. After that, we'll go straight on. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live Like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live and visit us at WMClive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. Celia and Cherríe. Good to have you here.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here, Robin. It's been a little bit.
Well,
just Cherríe.
I don't know where to begin because this is so impressive. Las Maestras, the festival, the Indigenous Xicana arts feminist gathering celebration miracle that the two of you have created, I don't know when, and still feed and have growing. Talk about it. How is it? What is it? How did it come to be? Just go right ahead, because I think it's just fantastic. I think it's the most. I don't think it exists, not to my knowledge, in any other academic institution, in any institution, and I don't think it exists for any group, ethnic, political, or otherwise. So I'm blown away. Go ahead.
Well, I think I'll pass it on to Celia, since I always she hates when I do this, but I'll pass it on to her because I have to really say that she's the sort of the brainchild behind all of this, and the only little part I will say about sort of the intro, not about the sort of the birthing of the idea of Las Maestras Center for Xicana, Indigenous Thought, Art, and Social Practice, but a little bit about just simply how it came to UCSB, which is they basically asked us, upon interest in hiring us, what do we want? And I came home. Celia and I had been together over 25 years, and I came home. She's a visual artist, and and I'm the writer. Yeah. I came home and I said, what do we want? And so now I'll pass it over to Celia because she had an answer. Anyway, so Celia.
What did you say, Celia?
Well, I said I wanted a center. I wanted a culture center that in what we basically that we could do the work that we had been doing for many years on our own. Cherríe at Stanford and myself at Berkeley. And I was adjuncting at Berkeley for about 17 years. So most of the work that I did was because I had to create space and place, in order to be an artist in Chicano studies.
Right.
And I think, I'll let Cherríe speak for herself in terms of, her work at Stanford, but it really did allow me to bring in and work within the various resources. I had to find resources within Berkeley. Some of those resources were the Multicultural Community Center, working with Elisa Huerta. The other was the Latinx recruitment, was La Raza Recruitment Center, and Retention Center, run by Lupe Gallegos. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there was the Ethnic Studies Library with Lily, and now I'm going to forget Lily's last name, Cherríe. Castillo Speed, yes. So, and then there were the students and other people who joined in, but it created a support system to be able to bring artists into the university, practitioners, indigenous, Chicano, native practitioners, into the university to address, basically my classes, but then it also created an ability to present to community. So I think besides my own work as a visual artist, we had been doing this work on our own, using resources and frequently, our own pocketbooks to create, a center, sort of a way in which we could express the work that we did and the things that were interesting to us. Between Cherríe as a writer and also as a playwright. That's really important because, it sort of spans that visual aspect.
Yep.
Of, yeah. So I'll say that much for now. This is what my initial thought. It was very naive, I think. We just wanted a space to be able to do this work. If this was the only reason that I felt that it was, that at the point that we were asked to, what we wanted, this was the thing I thought was most important for us, other than our own, as an aspect of our own work.
Wow.
And I'll say one more thing before I turn it over to Cherríe. It's that aspect that we call art and social practice, which was introduced to me by one of my former students, Jesus Barraza, part of Dignidad Rebelde, and in speaking about the kind of work that he was studying, the kind of work I was doing. And I think since then, it's kind of evolved. And, as you can see, Las Maestras Center for Xicana, Indigenous Thought, Art, and Social Practice is a long thing to introduce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
So
would
lately I've been...
and it would scare most institutions and send them right up through the ceiling and into the sky. Yeah, betcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
What made the University of Santa Barbara open to this? What angel had visited them that gave them this vision? This is not standard, in my experience in institutions.
I'm going to pass that question to Cherríe.
Pass that on to me. Well, first of all, I do want to kind of add a little bit to Celia's intro, in the sense that there's also outside of our teaching practice, there's also another history that has been really formational, which has to do with La Red Xicana Indígena. That was an organization, La Red meaning network of Xicana Indígena, that organizers, a lot of art practitioners, et cetera, that we had been meeting since, 1999. And they're theatristas and visual artists and activists and community organizers and all that under this rubric of, of identifying with Xicana as an X, with the X in the front, which basically, and Celia also can speak to this, is that to really look at our work and how it's informed by our own indigenous heritage and active living praxis. Right. On a lot of levels. And these are women now. Now those women that we started with are now in their 50s, and moving on. And there's a lot of movement in this direction anyway. But when basically it came about when I was teaching at Stanford, that the chair at that time in the English department, and I haven't really even ever worked in the English department since I got a BA from Immaculate Heart College, and which some people might know what that college is, and it's feminism that was really important at that period of time. And I graduated in 1974. But I came in, I was at Stanford, had a job was fine, and basically the chair calls me up kind of out of the blue, because we have this, we'd like to bring you in as an exception to open recruitment. And basically what that meant is they could skip all the steps, and they really were very low on any kind of, Latino presence in the English department, which is not unlike a lot of English departments and arts-focused departments, et cetera. Right. And, they needed some bodies. They needed some bodies quick, because it's a Hispanic-serving institute. And so there is
they definitely needed bodies.
People have. So there's, it's a good 25% of the students are Latinos. So anyway, so they called me in, and I was kind of saying, I have a job, I'm okay, but they called me in, and I met with the dean and the, executive vice chancellor. I went through all these steps. And so that's when I ran home and asked, and I said, well, whatever happens, because we lived in Oakland, I said, whatever I'm doing, I can't do it alone. In terms of this idea, right? Because I went back and I talked to Celia, and then she said, let's at a certain level, sort of, let's make concrete what it is that we've been practicing anyway. What she just was saying. Yeah. So in that way, then I came back and I said, it's kind of like both of us or none of us, right? So, and what they were looking, the exception for open recruitment, to the credit, what they were looking at too is that I did have this body of work on Xicana, as a Xicana writer, as an out lesbian, as a feminist,
both of you did. It's not as though you were just stumbling around thinking, well, I'm looking for a gig somewhere, You were both accomplished people who had fellowships, who had, distinguished positions. You had also covered their bases, the bases that mattered to them. But this is
yes,
all,
but I just want to add, but the point, yes, you're absolutely right. And I think what's exceptional, right, is that we hadn't really played by the academic rules to get there.
no,
Right?
I know.
So that to me seems
That's
exceptional. That was pretty amazing because we didn't do all the tenure track and all that kind of stuff.
No, no,
You know?
no, 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 no,
And
no. You didn't do
yeah,
that at all,
yeah.
and that's amazing. That's remarkable because this is quite a surprise political. And I was just looking at something from the the website about altares, the for the Day of the Dead, Dia de Muerto. Altar making is a medicina for our spirits. It is not an empty folkloric appropriation. When we take the time to speak with our families, research our cultura, and tell our stories, naming and feeding the spirit is what keeps our connections alive. It's an art practice as well as a tradition that brings us back to ourselves, our families, our cultures, and communities. So you're linking it all together, and I'm a complete sucker. You talk about overlapping metaphors or linking disparate elements, and I'll just blow it in my ear and I'll follow you anywhere. I that seems absolutely central to me and very dangerous. I mean, I want to say to you, do they know what they're funding? I mean, do they do they understand? Maybe they shouldn't understand. No, this is profoundly radical. Tell me what happens to a student who finds herself wandering into one of your exhibitions and decides she'd like to join the program. Let's say she's a playwright, or she hopes to be a playwright. What kinds of things do you do with her, for her, by her, of her, that are so transformative? I think I can imagine some, but I can only imagine them.
Well, I'll do the playwright part first.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Celia can speak to the visual stuff, which actually, because it's much more hands-on than when I'm doing, a lot more of that takes place in our actual physical space for Las Maestras. But I will just use just one person in my mind when you said that. There's a student of mine that Yesenia, who's gone on to good things in her life and graduated a few years ago. But I remember she came into my playwriting class and all the students were there and after my introduction and getting people to talk to each other, etc., she comes up to me. And she's a first generation college student, transfer from community college. Mm-hmm. And Yesenia's great. I mean, she which a lot of the students are, if Latino students, a lot of them are transfer students. So she's brand new to UC Santa Barbara, and she comes up and she says, I don't know. She says, I don't think I have any stories. So I don't know if I should be here, like that, right? And I go, well, tell me a little bit about your life, right? So she talks about her parents are both from Oaxaca, and one of her parents is actually speaks Zapotec, is that they're all indigenous people, but some of them are closer to those origins than others. And so she says, yeah, they came to the United States, and then and then talked about their own work life, et cetera, et cetera. And I go, oh, girl, I go, sit down, take a seat, and stay,
Yeah.
Because I said, oh, you have this wealth of stories to tell. And then to watch her kind of movement in those 2 years, to get her BA and to write, both write creatively and also critically. Yeah. And to have her mother, then her mother came and we did this ceremony for a handful of graduates, and then her mother comes, and it was just such a beautiful moment, because you felt like, and again, I have to say this sort of thread that we've had too with community has been really, really important. And we can talk a little bit about how COVID actually helped us with that.
Really?
But I think she's the best example of how we've impacted students. For me personally as a writer, which is much more on the page than necessarily in act, actually bodies hands on, which is what Celia's.
But you bring all of the students, or at different times maybe, together to work on different projects or the same project, or work on their hope, their dream, their in other words, it's a workshop procedure, really, isn't it? Is it, or am I?
Celia, you can.
Well, yes, it's a workshop procedure. Now, you know how standard, you probably, Robin, know how standard art departments work. Students take classes, but the encouragement is always, to become an American artist, to become an artist, period, without any real prior connections.
Oops.
Like your aim is always New York, your aim is Paris, your aim, part of the canon, and that canon doesn't really. It's supposed that it doesn't have, a background, and a history, except within the centralized idea of Western art. And so for many students, Chicano students in particular, because those are the ones I work with most in art departments, they're much encouraged to let go of anything that's going to encapsulize them or hold them back or determine who they are. In other words, not Chicano artists, but artists, and it's not like anybody says that directly to you, but in the critique that you get for your work, and you see what's being lauded in critique in class.
And it has a chilling effect. It has a chilling effect,
So when I get students, that come to work with us, most of them are coming in. They come in from art departments because they're looking for something to relate to, something that they can think about in terms of their own work. But mostly, majority of my students are coming in to take Chicano studies classes from all over because they want to know something about their culture, about history. And so when we put them together in workshops and we start with the I, like who are they, where do they come from, what is their background, what is their story, it's not always easy. Sometimes it's very difficult because these are things they haven't thought about, they haven't connected to because they've never been encouraged to make those connections.
Sure.
And they're also with students that have never lost that connection. That's why they're in the program. That's why they're in the department, because they have a sense of that connection. And so when you put them together, right, they start to work on their projects, and we do projects. I think Cherríe works similarly, which they're working on individual projects, but they're also working collectively. It is a workshop process in that sense, but we're constantly, it's the reading, it's the artists that come in, it's the practitioners that come to visit, it's the conversation, until they get that, as they, hopefully are able to see that they don't have to lose who they are, and they actually need ground to stand on, and who they are is that ground. Because when you're standing anywhere making art, I guess the lie about it is that all artists have some connection. If it's a Western European connection, it's what's lauded, but it is a connection. And so to let go of everything you know and everything you are and your history means that you're standing there with no ground.
Right.
And that doesn't give you a position of strength in which to, make work as it is. Making work is always a little bit, it's a process. Sometimes it's not fun. You have to have confidence. You have to be able to explore. You have to be able to know, that if you have ground to stand on, then you can leap off of it, and there's some place to land on.
Yeah.
If you.
Yeah.
So
preferably.
Yeah. So I think that's in part the process of of creating those classes. Around backing it up with cultural information, and also. I would say multicultural. It's not just, I don't just talk about Chicano work, but Native work, African American work. We introduce them to folks that are working, and have a politic, have a perspective. So I'll say that much, and then Cherríe, I know you.
This is fantastic. This is really amazing. Can you think of any? I seriously cannot think of a. Let's say a Black Studies program, an Asian Studies program, or anywhere, no matter how radical, how feminist, how connective it is, that does this kind of free-flowing, free fall, free everything profound work. I mean,
Well, I think there's a sorry. Go ahead.
no. I was going to ask about identity, but go ahead, Cherríe, and we'll get back to it.
Well, I guess this is about identity too. I think that it's not we have our center is in two divisions, and so what Celia hasn't mentioned is all of the kind of community engagement in the Santa Barbara area that has gone on through LMC. That you don't have to be a student to be connected to us, and a lot of that has to do also with the fact of things that did come out during COVID, where we were doing everything online. And Celia can tell you more about the projects, even that were done with connections with some folks in Mexico, and some of the things that I was doing. I mean, we were connecting, queer people of color from Brazil to Vienna, and all of a sudden everybody's online. So really, the visibility and the connect. We realized that partly, that subtitle for Xicana, Indigenous Thought, Art, and Social Praxis is really the thing that distinguishes it, because there are no really specific programs to that effect in academia, as far as we know either, although there are, hundreds and hundreds of people doing this kind of work in their own capacities, right? We just happen to be fortunate enough where we were able to give it a three-dimensional space.
You
and
sure were.
Get initial funding from the university to support those ideas, because as Celia was saying, it's mostly been out of pocket.
Yeah.
Celia and I have collaborated in plays. She's designed the plays that I have worked on, et cetera, and a lot of it, when we do those productions, and this was the stuff that brought us here to the idea of making it social practice and art, is that the ideas that were in the plan, the ideas that were in the text that we were creating together, even including New Fire to Put Things Right Again, the plays that we were doing, and those ideas, those philosophies, about what it means, and I'm sure you also understand this. It's like that the philosophy is that how do we go home? We have to look backwards in order to get well. We're going to have to get well.
That's right.
And the backwards is not backwards; it's forward, right?
Yeah.
So some of the requirements of our is to think about them, and really and truly, to what degree does indigenous thinking, the ideas of non-Western thought, in broadly thought of, we brought in like Latamani to talk, a South Asian sister. We bring in diversity of people thinking outside of the West in order to be able to, not only for our students, but for all of us, because we do a lot of live streaming, to try to communicate the ideas that, instead of trying to keep, to counter individualism, to counter competitiveness, to counter the whole idea of nation state, borders, all of that is all based in indigenous thinking, really, if you look at it. And that's a broad category.
Well,
right?
It throws everything into question.
So and so partly, we've also had this series of, Chicana Latinx public voice, which we bring in people that we identify as public intellectuals, some of them are in academia, some of them are not, but and as Latinos, the Latinx people, being able to have a public face and voice, which is pretty invisible in this country. It's like no one's asking us what we think.
Yeah.
So all of that has kind of, that's what sort of comes together. In all the sort of that is both philosophical, it's also both for activists. It's also engaged in the specificity of place being where we're standing right now, community, but also internationally, right?
Yeah.
The connections that we've been making.
Well, what I find fascinating is that when I, mentioned to a few people that we were going to be doing this show and focusing it basically totally on the center and the work that you both do with the center and the work that you do as well. Not as well, but primarily with the center. The number of people said to me, well, Cherríe Moraga, but she's Xicana, isn't she? And I said, yeah, she's Xicana. And they, well, but why is it indigenous? And I found that I was having to explain the obvious, which ought to be pretty clear. Not only that every group, no matter how far you go back, is going to be indigenous, but that this in particular is a different perception of the universe and a different way of putting it into practice. And that's what I found fascinating about it. It isn't just a crisis in identification, hardly. And in this whole sub-series that we've been doing in the podcast, which is specifically, we began with Native American women, and then very quickly it expanded into Indigenous, and it was the Igorot people in the Philippines, and it was, it was all over the place. And so we just went with that because that's what was there. That was the richness and the connectivity that was already inherent in the material itself and in covering the material. I just think that there's a way in your doing this. This must be incredibly moving in terms of the art that you actually produce. I mean, whether it's paintings or music or plays or installations, this must be brain blowing to many people. Do they?
I think that when you're talking about there's a key that the reason why people would say, well, she's Xicana, they're Chicanas, and what does that have to do with Indigenous anything, right? I think largely what happens is that so I want to go back to that little part because it's a tender part, right?
Right.
That basically people are very ignorant about the history of Mexicans in the United States.
Of course.
And, and even what Chicanas are out of Mexicans in the United States. And which really has to do with, the whole history of colonization, et cetera, where we are, we are mestizo people and, we don't think in blood quantum and, but that the movement in terms of Indigenous consciousness among Chicanos began as early as the Movimentos in the 60s, if not before. I mean, in general, it's always been there, but in terms of the politicization of it, is as early as the 60s, So I think that is just simply not known nationally because much is not known about us nationally. What's known about us nationally tends to simply be to think of us as an immigrant people. And if we don't recognize the border, then we aren't an immigrant people anyway. And plus, many of us have been here from, I always say, as Celia's grandmother said, since the sun first shined, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know, Celia, you wanna say more about that particular, because this is an issue we do have to confront on the daily. Celia,
well,
people,
I found it so strange but interesting, but strange that because people were very not obsessed, but very interested in, that's interesting. So Cherríe Moraga, I always thought of her as a Chicana poet. And I was thinking, well, she is a Chicana poet, and she is a Chicana playwright. And then I am. Yeah, of course you are. And then they move on to the next step is, well, how does she identify? Which is a very Western lens. I thought to myself, well, they wouldn't ask how I identify, and there's a whole bunch of European strains that are going on in me that are not evident, and un-American ones, or this continent anyway. And I thought, I began to think about how this is applied so differently to different groups. And it's just it's fascinating. It opens up bloodlines. It opens up, colonization big time. I am just mind blown by the center. And the center, even though it is clearly working in Spanish and English, isn't only working in that, right? I mean, you have people who are coming to it to look at their Indigenous connections from all quarters. Or am I wrong?
Well, I think that this is Celia again. I wanted to go back a little bit because I think that, Cherríe was saying, and you also mentioned in terms of this obsession, with identity in terms of blood.
Yeah, and it's pigeonholing too. It's that labeling.
It is it is a very, right now is kind of hitting, it is a very controversial, Chicana indigenous is very controversial at this moment because it keeps getting, how do I put it, caught up in the blood quantum issue, which I think is a racial issue, and it really does have to do with colonialism.
Yeah.
I think the colonial project has been, has been that, of dividing. Well, for me, it's removing people.
Yeah.
Every time you remove a people, there is a policy that doesn't allow you to return. And if you think about United States policy, it isn't a world policy. It's a United States policy that's based on race and blood quantum. If you flip over to Mexico, Mexico identifies indigenous peoples differently. But again, Mexico's identification of indigenous peoples, has its own problems since it doesn't have any indigenous peoples there have institutes, but no, everybody there was declared a citizen. So, all peoples declared citizen regardless of race, and so it changes the policy. But then again, it's how do I put it? It confuses the situation in that Mexico tends to count its indigenous people by how many monolingual speakers there are, and people become mestizos when they are bilingual or when they are not speaking the language exceptionally.
Oh, and earlier I was thinking, well, that's a good thing if everybody's a citizen then. But I see.
So it is. So in terms of the project of colonialism, it is removal. And so, anyway, there's more to say about that, more than 20 minutes, but I think I want to just say this, that taking a Chicana indigenous perspective as opposed to a Western perspective means that it's not taking an outside perspective, it's taking an inside from the ground up, looking at, at what has happened historically, looking at, at the timeline, not from the moment the colonizer, hit the ground, but looking at what was here before that and what continues to be here. And so it isn't so much a blood quantum identification, and also mestizaje doesn't only have to do with blood quantum, it has to do with language, has to do with culture, has to do with history, and also self-identification. So it is controversial, and I think that we're, 50 years into the project, in terms of being able to articulate, historicize, publish, all the things that, that we are now encountering. And yet people still continue to want to identify, and pinpoint us to the border and limit us to the border and limit us as migrant people and disallow the fact that, we're an evolving peoples, not people, but peoples. We are many different nations of people. And since colonialism insists on nation state, then, we keep getting identified with Mexico or the United States.
Right.
And it creates divisions in our own brains as well. So I think indigenous perspective, for us is, looking from the inside out and saying, okay, so, let's lift the colonial mindset, the colonial curtain of borders and timelines, and have continuity. We are a people of this continent, and we have, the ability then to see, before the colonial timeline and continue to see how we continue to resist. And how do you resist in the midst of colonialism? It brings up a lot of questions, and it brings up a lot of complications. And I think that those are, to me, opportunities for us to think through. So I think that's been our question. When you asked, it's Spanish, English, but we also have been inviting folks to come and do their projects and, and utilize the resources of the center, to imagine, and to also work and connect. So we've had different people come through, and most recently, we have Professor Giovanni Bott, who's new professor here to Chicano Studies, who was able to and has, when he got here, to use Las Maestras Center to present the work that he was doing in Guatemala with the Maya and the politics of the day, which were very important and continue to be, very, very crucial, to continue to have communication. So And there's other things that I think we're capable of. It's like to me, it's almost like we continue to evolve and we continue to remain open to the possibilities of how we can imagine when we say Chicana, indigenous.
God, what a good teacher Celia must be. What a great teacher she is. No, I was just realizing that she laid out this whole glittering panoply of splendor and made it accessible, made it welcoming, made it feel like it was a perfectly natural, normal thing to do. Yes, of course, naturally. Why wouldn't it be? So that familiar is the word I'm looking for. Made it feel inviting and familiar, exciting and new, but familiar. And that talent is quite remarkable. I can't and I won't and I don't but I want to move to Santa Barbara and just, take a course. I just
You don't want to move to Santa Barbara.
You have a hapless, gringa in her 80s stumbling into class.
Oh, no, that's the good part. That would be the good part.
Oh, that'd be the good part, eh?
Yeah. Oh, having you come, that'd be great. That'd be great. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Santa Barbara's, I'm just saying, because Santa Barbara is its own, it's its own island of, incredibly, very stratified, economics, here.
Uh-huh.
So it's not always an easy place to be. And the university's really, it's been a good place for us, certainly. But Santa Barbara, but the sea is remarkable. You just keep looking through the mountains and the sea, and that gives
that's
you
good stuff.
A great sense of contentment. Really good. Yeah, it's great.
Listen,
really
take a moment, please, each of you, and speak a little bit about your own work and what you're doing right now. I know Cherríe is working on the anniversary editions of the classics that she produced earlier with new introductions and things, but tell me any other new things, and also please, Celia.
Well, I think, having completed these two texts, Waiting in the Wings, which was the 25th anniversary of the book, which A Portrait of a Queer Motherhood. So that was, finishing that book, which was really, it's been interesting going back to the 25 years upon the birth and the challenged birth of my son. And then it was a memoir, but then the other collection, which is like the first 20 years of my writing. So it was going back as early as the late 1970s, like 1977, 1978's earliest work.
Isn't that weird?
Going up to,
isn't that a weird feeling? Yeah.
It's really weird. But the beauty of it to me was that, I took out lots of stuff. It's selected writing, but the beauty of it was really that I could see this young writer not as me, which felt really good.
Right.
It was she. And there was a certain way in which I have to say I appreciated it. I appreciated that. It ain't about me. It's like that there was a certain courage in that young writer because writing about being Chicana and lesbian was not the standard fare at all.
Yeah.
At all. And I never read about it, But it also gave me pause in terms of now, of looking at the time that we have left in front of us as writers and artists. And I realized so where is there's been works in between, certainly, but now I feel like there's a question of courage, So what is next? What's required next? To me, that requires my courage. And, so I had just started working on a piece about California, and that was, it was sort of a deadline. I agreed to this deadline to write about something about imagining California because after Native Country of the Heart, which was a memoir about my relationship with my mother, it's all based in California, Alta California, Baja California. It's like, I felt like I needed to return to the history of California. And, and it was really hard because it was really, I ended up just writing about genocide. Right.
Yeah. Well,
and so I write about genocide, and by the time when I'm finishing this very rough draft is also when all the stuff was going on in Palestine, and
Yeah.
Israel, etc. Is this? But I guess all I'm saying is that as a writer, I feel like, and I say this to you as a sister writer. It's like we ask ourselves, what's the hardest thing to write about, and always when one writes too, it's not. There's no them in it.
No,
there's no them. It's me. It's us.
right.
It's us. It's us. It's us and us. And so the question for this, this writing has been very difficult to say. She can vouch for it. I'd come down for the fifth.
Absolutely.
But anyway, that's sort of what I'm thinking.
If, as they say, all politics are local, then certainly all writing is personal, and so it rips it out of you.
Yeah, this has been a rough one. So I'm looking forward to it, though. I mean, I'm looking forward to more time, to be able to see where I go next. And I do want to get my plays collected. That's one thing I haven't done.
That's wonderful.
So, this is okay. There's always projects, but yeah, okay.
All right, Celia.
Well, I in part, looking forward to a sort of, I think it's a retrospective. I keep at the Cheech Marin Museum in 2026, but I'm not sure if that's where I want to stop. I think I have to say that lately I've been witness to many shows of women who are now past or are in their 90s and are having their first major exhibitions. And people who've been working, like Yolanda Lopez, since the 70s, who's would have benefited from many museum shows.
Yeah, a little encouragement.
So I'm now working toward a similar experience of having a retrospective when I'm still making work. I mean, right now I'm still very much interested in the work that I started to do with Cherríe, starting with The Hungry Woman, which introduced some of the ideas, concepts, icons, that we as Xicana feminists have been interpreting. And I think, at this point, realizing that what we were interpreting or looking for was complete thought, was a feminist, perspective then of history, which gives us complete thought that we're not just, the wives, daughters, of the gods, as perceived. But that in what's left on the temples, the sculpture and the paintings and the ceramics, tell stories of who and our participation in culture as women, our making of culture as women and thinking.
Right.
So I keep examining those same, and also I think at this point we're finding ourselves then having benefited from all the information that has been exposed to this, in these last 50 years, especially in the last 15, 20 years. So I'm still working with those ideas and then finding ways to recontextualize those ideas to where we are sitting now, like what is happening, what do we need to know, what is the medicine of the history that surrounds us.
Yeah.
I keep imagining it this way. If we have the opportunity then to think about our planet and and what's here, what remains, even though it's in fragments, if we can still, continue to, to imagine a whole, then that's how I see my work, looking for those fragments and putting them together so I can see the whole as much as possible. And so that's what I continue to do in terms of installation work and the painting work and trying to just be alive, right, as a thinker and as an artist.
Yeah, and that's pretty demanding in itself. I find as I age and just keep working without stop, because it's I always I always say to friends, time's winged chariot is not just drawing near; it's now double parked. And so,
I like that line.
So I have to get my ass in gear. I have to get it together and do this. So the book, the new book, which has a poem to Cherríe in it, about art, is one gesture in that direction. But I'm amazed at how the work keeps coming. Anyway, I am enormously grateful to the two of you for having envisioned and created and sustained, which is always the hardest part, this remarkable, I don't know what to call it. It's an ongoing alternate reality. It's not an institution that you have made that is just miraculous. And I thank you for letting us eavesdrop on it. Do you want to give a website that people can check it out?
Yeah, I have to move over to my desk here. I think it's pretty easy. I had it open.
Las Maestras Center.
Yeah, it's just it's just
That's
the
LAS.
usual HTTPS thing that but it's just www. So it's it's LAS MAESTRASCENTER.UCSB.edu.
And it's for Xicana, Indigenous Thought, Art, and Social Praxis.
Yeah, and Xicana is with an X. Yeah. And also we have a YouTube channel that's really has many of these conversations.
Oh, say.
Already recorded, and they can just go to YouTube and look for the same thing, Las Maestras Center, UCSB.
So if they look up Las
really
Maestras,
a wealth of information there.
If they just check out Las Maestras.
Let me just do YouTube, and I'll see right now. We're stumbling along here.
Wow.
Las Maestras.
This is very exciting. It's like discovering a whole very old, I was going to say a whole new, but a very old, very ancient and incredibly renewing universe. And that's so exciting. Thank you, Celia, and thank you, Cherríe. I'm just very grateful.
Well, I'm grateful to you, Robin. It's been nice to get to know you this way. This is Cherríe. I appreciate it, and I'm very. I just want to say the thing about what you were. I just wanted to comment on as we get older, right?
Yeah.
And I just really agree with you. And we are, if you're double parked, we're like a little scurrying right behind you, And I really feel it. I feel it's a wealth of time. I really feel like it's a wealth of time. So I thank you for being supportive of Las Maestras and me personally. And I always just wish you well.
Oh, listen. God.
This is Celia, and I would like to thank you as well, Robin. Thank you for this interview and, the airwaves, and thank you for your work.
Oh, wow. Well, I hope it's worthy. You never know, but you keep doing it, don't you? You just keep
Yes.
You keep on doing it. And it's the other day I came across a poem that I wrote when I was a very young poet, and it was like having my Altares poem. I mean, because it was about La Donna Sebastiana, and and I was like 24, and it ends with "They can never save me. I know now," and it's a celebratory poem. Mother of death, Lady of death, I am yours. And I know now that even though they may burn the cart and they will burn the wheat sheaves and they'll burn you, and that I know now they can never save me. And it's really chillingly spooky, but I know what I meant by that. And in fact, they have not been able to save me. And I am so pleased at that.
For all of us. That's great.
So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We have to take another pause now, but I will be back directly with some fighting words that are pure poetry. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
This poem, fittingly enough, was written and dedicated to Cherríe Moraga after a long and meaningful conversation we had about art in my garden. The poem is from Harvesting Darkness, my new collection, and it's called Terms of Art for Cherríe Moraga. Some people, they claim, manage to die peacefully in their sleep. How can anyone tell that? How does anyone say how anyone lives or could die, above all in their sleep? For in that sleep, who knows what wakenings may come? The mystery slams shut and locks behind you once you enter it. Only the one question, what now, endures. No matter how you answer that, you're dead. Nyctophobia is fear of darkness, octophobia, fear of light. Terms of art. The best you can long for and dread is to live out your life as an artist, I'm betting. Preoccupied? Yes. Arrogant? Certainly. Fools snarl elitist, as if this didn't demand obsession, driving its relentless harrow across your life-work's form, plus pitiless indifference to the cries of those who dared believe you loved them. And so you did, for rare moments wedged between or at the edge of magic, when dailiness was not irrelevant, not trivial and tortuous, like need. But that required will, your will to choose love of darkness or of light, the will to select one aim above all others, to bend every action you thereafter take toward that sole end to which each string of your existence vibrates, the worst you dread and long for, the life you chose. Who cares how you will die? Some aneurysm might bloom inside your skull, cascading perfection you'd once crawled through days and thrashed through nights to find. That rupture beyond peace, unprofanable, only to laugh at the last, because it was never attainable. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on social media at The Robin Morgan. You can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net, and you can find my new novel, Parallax, and my just-out new book of poems, Harvesting Darkness, wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer, as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer for this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us next time on Women's Media Center Live.